The other pictures are there. 17 years girl, she was forced to have sex with 500 men. And the advertisement, if now you go to the street, you will find there are almost more than 90% of the advertisement. They just exploit the women and they just make their advertisement in the media. We find the prostitution in the Nordic countries. And the Nordic Gender Institute, they publish these books. And there are numerous number of sexual assaults and rapes took place in America. Every 2 minutes is one woman is being raped. And in CNN and in BBC, we find various news about the American soldiers, in the American universities in the West. What is the present context of the women in the society? So if we closely look and view these pictures of the society, we have to agree also in this sense that the Western talk about women liberalization is nothing but it is an exploitation of a body, is a degradation of her honor, and is a deprivation of her soul. The Western talk who talks about upgrading the women and their status, they are actually giving their status to a concubine, to a mistresses, to a society butterflies. But of course we do not see it because these are employed in the market by the sex marketers and the pleasure seekers. But no one can understand because it is going under the sections of colorful screen in the world. The media is playing the big role. Whatever inside, the impact they never shows. Islam gives women's rights 1400 years ago. And we find various examples from the past civilizations. If we look back to many civilizations and if we see the pictures in the society, we see how women were degraded and women were not given as a right of a human dignity. Just to give you some of the examples from the past civilization, we have various history from the past, like Babylonian civilization. In the Babylonian civilization, the women, they were degraded, they were not honored, and many a times, if a man murdered a woman, instead of him being put on the death, his wife is supposed to be put on the death. This is the Babylonian. And in the Greek civilization, we know that this is one of the most glorious ancient civilization in the history. And under this glorious civilization, in inverted comma, the women, how they were treated. The Greeks, they believe in their mythology, there is a woman by the name called Pandora, and she is the misfortune of this whole human race. And the women were degraded and not being honored as a human being. Later on, the Greeks, they just overwhelmed with prostitution and nudity. This was very common among all the classes in the Greek society. We find in the Roman civilization, this is another glorious civilization. And under this civilization, a man had the right to take the life of his wife. This is the history and this is recorded. In the Egyptian civilization, we come close to the Arab civilization. In Egyptian civilization, we find that the women, it was also called as a sign of a devil, and women were degraded. In the pre-Islamic Arabia, before the Quran was revealed, we also find that the women were one of the strongest position at the society. Many times when a female child was born, she was buried alive. This was the Arabs before the Quran was revealed. And Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah, after the Quran was revealed, the women have got their due rights and their status. So, before I go to deal with this vast topic about women's rights, I would like to make few points clear to my Muslim brothers and sisters and the brothers and sisters of humanity. That now at the world today, approximately 20 to 25% population are Muslims. 1/4 to 1/5 of the population are Muslim. Many Muslim society is close to the Quran, and many other society, they are far away from Islam. As I said, Islam means the Quran and the authentic narrations. And there are many Muslim society who truly, we have to agree, they are far away. So while we concern about the women's rights in Islam, we must not focus on any particular society or any particular community. As far as women's rights in Islam is concerned, we have to go back to the original source, that is the book of the authority of the Muslim of Islam, that is the glorious Quran and the authentic narrations. So we find in the Quran, as I told you earlier, how to deal with these subjects. Go back to the index, see the references, and it's very easy to find. Many a time we find many scholars in the world, they just quote and picked up one verses of the Quran and they neglected the others. But we have to say that Quran must be analyzed as a whole. In one particular verses of the Quran, if the meaning is ambiguous, in other places the meaning is there. And many times the Quran answers itself in other places. And the secondary sources of the Quran, the complementary and the interpretation of the Quran is the authentic narrations of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the last and final messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So no authentic narrations will go against the Quranic verse, and no two sound narrations of the Prophet will contradict each other. So when we analyze the Quran and Hadith, we must see through that we analyze as a whole. And the other things is that if sometimes we find many Muslims individually he commits something bad, and that Muslims must not be an exemplary Muslims in the media. Muslims should be considered as a vast majority, and in Islam we must consider the authentic text, authentic books. In community, I have to agree that we are already behind, but there are problems, as I give you examples, that there are problems all over in the world. So we must consider the Quran and the Sunnah, the narrations, to understand the women's rights in Islam. The last things that I would like to tell of myself and to my brothers and sisters especially, that we must not fight each other in the terms of superiority. We must not give our desire to control over us. We are here to seek the pleasure of our Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He has created us, He has well defined the rights of a man and the rights of a woman. And it is not up to us to define who is superior, because in Islam there is no superiority. Because if there is a superiority, there comes inferiority. Women and men in Islam are the same. But equality, it does not mean identicality. So we have to clear about this concept. As far as the rights of women is concerned, in my lecture I will try to highlight these 6 major issues which is always raised in the hearts and minds of the people. First of all, the spiritual rights of the women. The second is the economical right. The third is the social right. The fourth is the educational right of the women. Fifth is the legal rights. And the sixth is the political rights of the women. So we see and discuss about the 6 aspects of the rights